No historian can give a straight answer to the question, how many gay men were there in ancient Rome? Not because the topic was taboo, but because the Romans understood sexuality very differently from how we do today. They had no concept of homosexuality in the modern sense. Nobody listed sexual orientation in documents, tracked it with stats, or used it as a personal label. What we now see as part of someone's identity was, for Romans, just behavior, judged not by the gender of the partner, but by social role and status. The key factor wasn't gender. It was who did what to whom. Romans didn't divide people into hetero and homo. Instead, they focused on sexual roles. The active partner was seen as a normal man, especially if he held a dominant social position, older, wealthier, or a free citizen. The passive partner, particularly if he was also a Roman citizen, was seen as weak, feminine, and laughable. Not because he slept with men, but because he allowed himself to be used. So, a slave could be his master's passive partner, and that was normal. But if a freeborn Roman citizen took the same role, he could be publicly shamed. Senators caught up in such rumors risked their careers, not because of who they slept with, but because of the disgraceful position they assumed. Emperors, lovers, and rumors. Some Roman emperors openly expressed desire for men. The most famous example is Emperor Hadrian, whose love for the young Greek Antinous became legendary. After Antinous died, Hadrian deified him, named cities after him, and even established a cult in his honor, something no emperor had done before. Nero is another example. He didn't just marry a man named Sporus. He also staged a public wedding ceremony complete with wedding attire, witnesses, and a feast. He had earlier taken another man, Pythagoras, as a wife. Though people laughed behind his back, Nero faced no punishment. He was emperor. Rules didn't really apply. Humor, satire, and social boundaries. Roman poetry and literature are full of sexual innuendo, crude jokes, and biting satire. Poets like Juvenal, Martial, Catullus, and Petronius mocked politicians and nobles alike. But they didn't attack same-sex relationships themselves, only unmanly behavior. What drew criticism was passivity, softness, and too much femininity, especially in someone who was supposed to act like a dignified Roman male. Law. What was actually forbidden. Before Christianity, Roman law had no statute against male-male sex. What mattered more was consent, age, and status. You couldn't seduce a free-born youth from a respected family or assault someone else's slave, but keeping a beautiful boy in your home, if you were a wealthy senator, that was socially acceptable. Things changed after Christianity became the state religion. By the 4th century CE, laws began to explicitly condemn what they called sodomy. Under emperors like Theodosius and Justinian, men could even be executed for it. But that belonged to a different era, and a very different moral code. So, were there gay men in Rome? By today's standards, yes, lots. But the Romans wouldn't have described it that way. Men had sex with men, especially younger ones, and thought little of it. As long as you were active, wealthy, and respected, no one cared who shared your bed. But if you were passive and freeborn, that was shameful. It wasn't about orientation, it was about masculinity and power. So the question, were there gay men in ancient Rome, misses the point. A better question is, how flexible and pragmatic was the Roman view of sexuality? Answer, far more so than anything that came after. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like and subscribe. See you in the next episode.